Report: Disaster at Ionith by Lord Potrade, Chairman. An Imperial scripted dispatch concerning Uriel V's invasion of Akavir. Part 2. The Invasion of Akavir. The expeditionary force left Black Harbour on 23rd Rains Day 288, and with fair weather landed in Akavir after 6 weeks at sea. The landing site was a small Tseski port at the mouth of a large river, chosen for its proximity to Tamriel, as well as its location in a fertile river valley, giving easy access to the interior, as well as good foraging for the army. All went well at first. The Tseski had abandoned the town when the expeditionary force approached, so they took possession of it and renamed it Septimia, the first colony of the new imperial province of Akavir. While the engineers fortified the town and expanded the port facilities to serve the Far East's fleet, the emperor marched inland with 2 legions. The surrounding land was reported to be rich, well-watered fields, and meeting no resistance, the army took the next city upriver, also abandoned. This was refounded as Ionith, and the emperor established his headquarters there, being much larger than Septimia and better located to dominate the surrounding countryside. The expeditionary force had yet to meet any real resistance, although the legions were constantly shadowed by mounted enemy patrols which prevented any but large scouting parties from leaving the main body of the army. One thing the emperor sorely lacked was cavalry, due to the limited space on the transport fleet, although, for the time being, the battle mages made up for this with magical reconnaissance. The emperor now sent out envoys to try contact the Tsetski king, or whoever ruled this land. But his messengers never returned. In retrospect, the Commission believes that valuable time was wasted in this effort while the army was stalled at Ionith, which could have been better spent in advancing quickly, while the enemy was still, apparently, surprised by the invasion. However, the emperor believed at the time that the Tseski could be overawed by the empire's power, and he might win a province by negotiating with no need for serious fighting. Meanwhile, the 4 legions were busy building a road between Septimia and Ionith, setting up fortified guard posts along the river, and fortifying both cities' defences, activities which would serve them well later. Due to the lack of cavalry, scouting was limited, and communication between the 2 cities constantly threatened by enemy raiders, with which the legions were still unable to come to grips. The original plan had been to bring the 2 reinforcing legions across as soon as the initial landing had secured a port, but the fateful decision was now taken to delay their arrival and instead begin using the fleet to transport colonists. The emperor and the council agreed that due to the complete abandonment of the conquered area by its native population, colonists were needed to work the fields so that the expeditionary force would not have to rely entirely on the fleet for supplies. In addition, unrest had broken out in Inleslea, at was the supply route to Akavir, and the council believed the 9th and 17th legions would be better used in repacifying those territories and securing the expeditionary force's supply lines. The civilian colonists and their supplies began arriving in Septimia in mid-Hearthfire, and they took over the preparations of the fields, which had been started by the legionnaires, for a spring crop. A number of cavalry mounts were also brought over at this time, and the raids on the 2 imperial colonies subsequently fell off. Tseski emissaries also finally arrived in Ionith, purportedly to begin peace negotiations, and the expeditionary force settled in for what was expected to be a quiet winter. At this time, the council urged the emperor to return to Tamriel with the fleet to deal with many pressing matters of the empire while the army was in winter quarters. But the emperor decided that it would be best to remain in Akavir. This turned out to be fortunate, because a large portion of the fleet, including the emperor's flagship, was destroyed by an early winter storm during the homeward voyage. The winter storm season of 288 to 289 was unusually prolonged and exceptionally severe, and prevented the fleet from returning to Akavir as planned, with additional supplies. This was reported to the emperor via battle mage, and it was agreed that the expeditionary force could survive on what supplies it had on hand until spring.